My name is Lindy Avalos. I was diagnosed at 34 years old with stage 4 adenocarcinoma or stage 4 colon cancer. Um, I'm currently, well, I've lived here my whole life, but Berkeley, California. And I'm a new mom. Actually, 2.5 months postpartum is when I was diagnosed. So I had two back to back life-changing things, but the biggest thing in my life right now is being a new mom to an almost 1-year-old. So it's a little bit of a long story, so stick with me. So this was my first pregnancy, so I didn't really know what was the normal for me because every pregnancy is a little different. And at about 6 months pregnant, I started having severe abdominal pain. And changes in bowel movements, blood in the stool, um, just a lot of pain, and I wasn't eating a lot. But a lot of the symptoms for colon cancer can be aligned with what you kind of have symptom wise during pregnancy because of hemorrhoids and things like that. So we didn't think too much of it, especially since I don't have any colon cancer in my family tree to kind of give a red flag. Um, I just kind of trudged through pregnancy, very painfully, but again, it was my first pregnancy, so I kind of assumed that's how it was. And then at 2.5 months postpartum, I went in for a routine MRI because I have previous to this in 2011, I had a meningioma, which is a benign tumor that grows from the lining of the brain. So every few years, I have routine MRIs. And I also had a spinal tumor from that original meningioma. So I have a full upper body MRI. And on the MRI, they said, hey, there's no recurrence of the meningioma, but you should go get checked because we're pretty sure this is malignant cancer. So it was kind of by chance that we found it. And by the time we had discovered what was going on, I was a stage 4, and it was in the colon, obviously, and it had metastasized to the lymph nodes, the liver, and the lungs. So, and then I started treatment. I was diagnosed in end of December, and I think I started treatment mid-January. So it was all very quick. But through chance, basically, we found the cancer, which is, I'm thankful that I had a reason to get checked out because who knows how long it could have gone on otherwise. And so I have been very fortunate. I know that this is not the normal, but all of my doctors don't really try to gaslight me or try to say, oh, you're too young. Or thankfully, there was a little bit of like, oh, it's probably nothing to worry about. It's probably, but once it continued on after I had given birth, they pretty quickly realized that something was up. They just didn't know what. So they were running tests. And then when I got the MRI is when they really moved quickly. So I'm very thankful that the team that I have didn't once try to be like, oh, because the normal age for colon cancer screening starts at 45 and I was 34. So that shouldn't have been, a matter of fact, when I was diagnosed, they said, oh, you have the old man's disease because that's what it had been for so long. So there could have been more pushback, but thankfully I have an amazing team. So I consider myself very lucky, even though, I have cancer, but the circumstances around having cancer, I've been very fortunate where I haven't had to fight very hard, to get people to listen to me and believe what I'm feeling. I'm almost positive I went into like a shock sort of state in the beginning because like being a new mother and not having ever experienced that's a whole life changing process, and then finding out a cancer diagnosis not even 6 months after is pretty wild. So I definitely, my brain kind of shut off for a little bit, and then once I kind of, because I'm very much research, and with a grain of salt, because the internet is the internet, but I wanted to know as much as I could. And so they actually told me, it's metastasized to these places, but I didn't understand staging yet. So before I even talked to my oncologist they had sent me like a welcome to having cancer packet, I suppose. And it talked about the different stages. And I said, oh, I have stage 4 cancer. So that I'm almost thankful that I found out on my own so I could process that, not in front of the oncologist, because I had a breakdown, obviously, and many more after that. But it was nice to be able to process that and sleep on that, and then go and talk to the oncologist. And because for me personally, cancer is a very personal journey, but I want the truth while still saying, hey, there's exceptions to the rules. And this is what we're going to do, as opposed to kind of being like coddled or being gently told things. I just would rather hear it straight, because I have to live the best way I can, and maybe under false pretenses, I suppose, is not what I want to do, especially since I have a young child and I need to make sure that everything is put in order for him in case something does happen. Because again, by the time they found it, it was already stage 4. So we were already pretty far advanced in it. From what I recall, the original plan is still the plan that it is now. We wanted to, now I'm fairly certain my tumor is it's, I know it's in the ascending colon, but it is on the right, nope, excuse me, the left side. So it was easy to access, but they didn't feel that doing surgery would prolong lifespan anymore. So they wanted to go in right away and start me on chemotherapy. And thankfully I've been doing that since mid-January, and I just recently, about a month and a half ago, I believe, transitioned just to maintenance chemotherapy, which is good because I have been responding fairly well to chemotherapy. And then in the future, hopefully we'll be able to remove the original colon tumor, because it does still give me pain occasionally. But just kind of seeing, because the problem is that a lot of my nodes are very small, so you can't target them with like radiation or anything like that, or removing them by surgery. So I kind of am fully reliant on chemotherapy at the moment as the treatment plan, because just because of how my cancer is. But I'm responding well, so, and I've had very little side effects, so I can't complain too much in the grand scheme of things. The first round of chemotherapy, I got quite nauseous, and vomited. But since then, I haven't really had that. I do have, I was on oxaliplatin for the first 6 months. So I do have neuropathy in my fingers and my feet. The fingers aren't too bad. The feet are pretty numb, but again, I don't have neuropathy pain. I just have the numbness. So I count myself fortunate, because I've heard that that can get very painful. So I'm no longer on that. I'm just on the maintenance chemotherapy. I am trusting the plan because it is working, so that it's easier for me to trust the plan now that I've seen kind of the fruits of that labor. It's a little frustrating for me because my personality is very much attack the problem, almost to a fault. And the fact that I can't do treatment a little bit more aggressively, I suppose, to knock, because no oncologist for the most part will say stage 4 is curable, it's just treatable, which I understand, but we all know that there are exceptions to the general rules, and that people do live a long time with stage 4 cancer. So I really want to knock out as much cancer as we can, and then deal with the pop-ups as they come. And in my current condition, while I'm improving greatly and I feel amazing, well, very good, I can't go in and have a bunch of surgeries and remove the tumors and things like that. So that's a little frustrating for me, but I'm learning to kind of just, it's working and it's improving. And even though I can't be as aggressive as I personally would like, it doesn't mean I'm not getting to the point where hopefully I'm in remission or at least NED. So I'm trying to work through that. A lot of times it's almost, I don't want to say easy because I feel like that's an insensitive word, but I feel very fortunate that most days I feel almost how I was before the diagnosis, as at least physically. Mentally, there are good days and bad days. There are days where I can just focus on other things like my husband and my child and just almost again go back to pre diagnosis. But then there's some days where I just have to just kind of sit in the feels and have a bad day and just kind of let that be how today is. And try not to push that away, but also try not to stay in that mind state because there were a good chunk of weeks where I was not doing too good. And I started just going outside and walking with my son. And that had helped greatly to just get me out of my head because that was where a lot of it was coming from. I was just doing the, well, what if this happens? And then what if this happens? And it's hard not to go there, but it's also not good to go there because you just never know. Either way, good or bad, you know? It's been really, really crazy, but thankfully I have an amazing group of friends and family who, you know, almost right from the second they found out were here at the house helping, just doing little tasks like cleaning for me. This is when I was still in a significant amount of pain, so everything was much more difficult. But, you know, anytime I have any questions about, you know, mom related questions, I have a bunch of people I can reach out to. And actually a few people had friends or family or coworkers or whomever who have also gotten a stage 4 of just general any cancer diagnosis that was like, hey, here is their number because it's easier for you to kind of have vent sessions with someone who could empathize. So there was a lot of that happening, which was great in the beginning. That really encouraged me to not stay in that dark place. And my son is really helpful because as people who have children know, they don't know what's going on, so they don't care what's going on, so they just are business as normal. So it's because I'm so busy taking care of him all day, I don't focus on the, I guess, darker aspects as much as I maybe could if I didn't have a baby to that I have to show up for and take care of. So it's almost been, if there was ever a time for me to get cancer, it was almost in this moment because there's so many other things I need to focus on that I can't just focus on the diagnosis, which is in the long run very beneficial for me. But it was a lot at once in the beginning when it first all happened. Yes. I always say, well, it's easy when you don't really have another choice. So I have to keep going. And so it's easy to, but everyone has said, you're so positive, you're so positive. And I think that now that I can see that I am responding and I do feel better, it's easier to have hope. For a while, I have quite dark humor, so I was making lots of, you know, dying jokes and things like that as a way to cope with just processing it. But so now there's less of that only because I can see maybe I can get to at least no evidence of disease. You know, I know that it's curable and excuse me, treatable and not curable, but again, there are exceptions to the rules. Things are changing every day, and who knows? You know, we will wait and see and hope that colon cancer specifically doesn't have a lot of research, especially with younger people, because it didn't really happen to younger people up until my generation, from what we know. There's a lot more people my age getting diagnosed. So hopefully even more research will come from that. And my oncologist put it as kind of like a waiting game. Can we get you healthy enough to hopefully science will progress and we will have some sort of trial or, anecdotal evidence that, hey, this is what's causing it, or. So I do have hope, but I also try to be realistic, and not set my expectations too far into what I want as opposed to what may happen. So, on the other end, I've made arrangements in case things don't go the way we hope they do. Because again, I have a child, and when you have a child, you have to just think about all the options, not even just with cancer, but especially with cancer. You have to kind of make sure all the bases are covered as best you can. I call cancer the great equalizer. It just does not care, and it's good unfortunately, if it's gonna get you, it's gonna get you. And again, as humans, we never think it's gonna happen to us until it happens to us. But so colon cancer specifically, I'm gonna talk on that because I know the most about that. Is, from again what I understand, incredibly prevalent now in my generation. Like I said, I'm 35 now. My sister is 31 and actually just had a colonoscopy, and they found 2 precancerous polyps. But had I not gotten cancer, she would have never gotten a colonoscopy at that age, and it could have turned into cancer. So the age definitely needs to be lowered. I've told everybody in my life, I said, I'm sorry to talk about your butt all the time, but please go get it checked, because it's the best for, again, colon cancer specifically. The best way to prevent it is to get them out as soon as you can find them. And so, yeah, I've talked to everyone in my family about their colon. I will say what I was told in the beginning, which is don't go on Google and don't read statistics. And if you do, because you will, know that the statistics you find on Google are out of date, and there are so many new advances, and don't go down the rabbit hole and spiral. Do obviously spend time with whomever fills your cup and makes you happy, because it's not always family, and try to find something that clears your mind, and so you can just kind of recenter and refocus, because it's really easy to doom scroll and get into a really bad place in our day and age where everything is at our fingertips. It can almost overload you, and then you just kind of spiral. At least I did. And so just kind of grounding and finding a really good care team. Do what you, if you have to travel 4 hours, the oncologist you have matters, and people who can give you the real talk while not being negative is very important, because I've heard horror stories about oncologists, and at this moment in your journey, they're one of the most important people. So you need to have it's almost like having a good therapist. You can't do it with a bad care team. So find a good care team. There's lots of resources. Go on to Facebook and see if you can find people who have the same diagnosis as you, because the people who've been through it are normally the best source of information. It's been incredibly helpful for me. And just try to live in the moment. And a palliative care team is so important if you have pain. A lot of people get scared because hospice and palliative go together a lot, and so they equate those as the same thing. But the palliative care team can vastly improve your quality of life, so you can enjoy the things you want to enjoy while doing this. So that's my little spiel on palliative care. They're very important, but people get scared. Don't be scared of them. And just try to find things that make you happy and make you live in the moment.